But welcome everybody. I'm seeing people start to flow into the webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. My name's Etan. I am a community and advocacy associate for NIAC, for the National Iranian-American Council. I'm based out of Brooklyn, zooming in with some great people tonight to take a break and escape from the crazy week we've had and weeks we've had, months we've had, however you want to contextualize it. We are so glad to be gathering our volunteers and others together here tonight to celebrate culture and literature and creators within our community, and to get into some fun themes and topics as well. And just want to give a few more minutes for people to trickle in to the room. But thank you so much for joining as well. I think we'll hard start in a few minutes. Just want to give folks a chance to join in. I know we have folks from all over the country. It's 8 o'clock for some, it's 5 o'clock for others. But pour up a glass of tea or something stronger if it's your prerogative, and I'm really excited to get into it tonight with everyone here. And a quick plug just before we get started for everyone. NIAC has chapters across the country. If you are looking to organize similar events to this, we do happy hours and dinners and other events organized by chapters. I'm so glad to be joined and co-hosting this with our chapter leader from Chicago, Yasmin. And I'll let her introduce herself in just a few moments. But we have chapters across the country. I'm coming to New York. We have people in DC and Seattle, across the West Coast, in LA and the Bay Area, and on and on. So if you are interested in putting something on in your area, in connecting with others, or getting politically involved, as we'll have a number of updates on, if you are subscribed to our email list or follow us on social media, we have August recess meetings with members of Congress coming up. But tonight is not about that. Tonight is about Abdi Nazemian and his wonderful book, Only This Beautiful Moment. I'll read you a little bit. We're very lucky to have Abdi join us and continue the tradition of Iranian American creators being hosted by NIAC. So Abdi is this book, by the way, and Abdi is the winner of the 2024 Stonewall Award and the 2024 Lambda Literary Award. And his other book, Like a Love Story, a Stonewall Honor book, and Abdi is is a winner of Time Magazine's best books of all time. He's the author of the young adult novels Desert Echoes, The Chandler Legacies, and The Authentics. His novel, The Walk-In Closet, won the Lambda Literary Award for LGBT debut fiction. His screenwriting credits include the films The Artist's Wife, The Quiet, and Menendez, Blood Brothers, and television series Ordinary Joe, and The Village. He has been an executive producer and associate producer on numerous films, including Call Me by Your Name, Little Woods, and The House of Tomorrow. He lives in Los Angeles with his husband and his 2 children and their dog, Disco. I'm so glad to introduce Abdi Nazemian, author, writer, screenwriter, producer, husband, and fabulous guest and creator for tonight. So Abdi, I'll turn it over to you in just a moment. I'm really sorry for being all jumbled. Yasmin, why don't I give you just a moment to introduce yourself as well, and then we can turn it over to Abdi.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yasmin Hoshnood, and I am the NIAC Chicago captain. I'm very excited to be here tonight and to host Abdi Nazemian for the book.
Thank you so much. Abdi, yeah, how about, so let's jump into it. Let's go right to you. I'd love to just give you an opportunity if you'd like to introduce yourself to everyone and to give an overview of the book, some of the main themes, your process, your approach to it as an Iranian-American. The story is a rich tapestry of identity and times and love and personal exploration, both inward and outward. Can you just
Thank you.
just tell us?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll tell you a little bit about myself, and please, if anyone who's listening has any questions, leave them in the chat. I was born in Iran. I left when I was 2, and my family went to France and Canada before ending up in the United States when I was 10. When I moved to the United States, I really didn't fit in. And so I was one of those kids who would just come home from school and bury myself in stories and movies, books, music. I mean, anything that was a fantasy world, it was an escape from the schools in suburban America I was going to. And so when I grew up, I really wanted to be a storyteller. Like, I think I knew firsthand the power that had, especially on young hearts and minds. And so I moved to Los Angeles right after college and got into the film industry, started as an assistant. I was reading. I didn't think I could be a writer because as an Iranian, it felt like an unrealistic goal to be an artist. I felt like I had to be more responsible. But after 2 years of being an assistant and my primary job was answering phones and reading scripts, I read so many scripts from working writers. I'm like, I think I could do this. And about like 8 years into a screenwriting career, I realized that every script I wrote that was really personal, like Iranian stories, queer stories, stories about that intersection, they would never get produced. They would just be writing samples that would get me jobs on movies, primarily about straight white people. And that's when I decided I should try and write books. And every single book, I think I have 5 published books, and my new one comes out in September. Every single one centers Iranian people. Every single one has at least one queer Iranian character, if not more, that's a lead character. The first book I wrote, I'm pretty sure, if nobody's corrected me, and an academic told me this, is the first book to have a gay Iranian male lead character ever, which is pretty wild. Came out in 2014. And that really told me, like, when I heard that, I'm like, wow, it doesn't surprise me really, but it galvanized me to just put more stories about my community into the world. And that's what I've been doing. And with Only This Beautiful Moment, which is by far my most personal novel and my favorite thing I've ever written, honestly, I really challenged myself to pull out from just a character who's maybe more inspired by me and my experience into a more multi-generational story. I think, like so many immigrants, and children of immigrants, I'm very obsessed with the past. You know, so many of us as immigrants, our history is so far away from us. Like, we know our parents and our grandparents went through so much, but we don't know what exactly. And in many cases, including in my family, they don't share a lot of it with us, I think, because they want to protect us from the pain and the trauma. So we grow up kind of knowing there's all this history that shaped our lives, but we don't know what the history is. And so this book in particular is a story about 3 men in the same Iranian family, and each one narrates a journey they take as a teenager, either from the United States to Iran or from Iran to the United States. And it's really 3 chunks. The grandfather character is in the 1930s, beginning in Los Angeles, and the father character is in the 1970s, and that's, of course, like built around the Iranian Revolution. And then there's a modern day character who is an Iranian-American kid who's out and who's going back to see his grandfather in Tehran, who's now ill. And a lot of it is about being queer in Iranian, about that intersection. 2 of the characters are queer, one is not. And that was really important to me because, you know, as a gay Iranian American who came out, I would say pretty early for our community. You know, when I came out, there were very few of us out. Like, people would always ask me if I dated any gay Iranians when I was young. I'm like, there were none. I didn't know them. But it was very important for me to both talk about in the book what it felt like to be at that intersection in the United States, because I always felt very cut in half when I was growing up. Like half of my life was within the Western gay community, and half of it was within the Iranian community, and those two communities just could never mix, and I was in between. And the other thing that mattered a lot to me was talking about what it's like to be queer within Iran. You know, I have family who live there, I have cousins who live there, I have friends who live there. I know there's a queer community, I know they exist. Many of them trusted me with their stories, and it felt really exciting to be able to present a version of life in Iran that's not what many people see on the news, that has nothing to do with war or politics or nuclear weapons or any of that. It's about people, communities. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Abdi. What you were saying, really, a lot of it resonated so much with me. And, you know, we really appreciate you being here and the representation and, you know, painting like a different portrait of what people think about Iranians and Iranian-Americans. So that being said, what inspired you to title the book Only This Beautiful Moment?
So in the book, there's something that connects every generation in the book, which is poetry, specifically Iranian poetry, which was something that really came from my life. I really love, like, my father, who's a very classic Iranian man, like, you know, very macho, very much of like that generation, but he can recite poems by heart. And I always loved that. Like, I always felt like there was something so special about somebody who, you know, is so stoic in his um, self-expression, but who can then like recite to you like an Omar Khayyam poem or a Rumi poem. And all of those poems and that kind of tradition of Iranian poetry meant so much to me. I mean, our son is named Rumi. That's how much it meant to me. And we did that before Beyonce named her kid Rumi. But so in the book, the generations share poetry with each other and read poetry to each other. And there's a Rumi poem, and I'm well aware that the English translations are not necessarily the most accurate. And I think I mentioned that in the author's note. But in the English translation, it says the light of the beloved shines only now. And so the original title of the book was The Light Shines Only Now. And really what that meant to me was that we're all in this moment, but when we're in this moment, we carry our history in us. And that's so much of what the book is about, is like, I'm here in the present day, but I know that within me is my parents' experience, my grandparents' experience, all that joy, love, pain, all of it is in you in the now. Even if it's history, it's still, the history is being experienced anew. The publishers didn't love that title, The Light Shines Only Now. I don't know what I think they said the word light was very overused in book titles, but I really wanted another title that just captured that theme of all we have is this moment. You know, that even when we talk about history, even when we talk about the ancient past, even when we're talking about the future, we're really just talking about this moment. That's all we have control over. So that's where it came from.
Wow.
And I suppose I liked, you know, just to add, I suppose I like the idea of beautiful, like, because they could be only this moment, but it's about beauty. I mean, it's about, so much of the novel is about how human beings will find beauty no matter what. And, you know, a lot of the books I write are hard books. Like, I wrote a book called Like a Love Story about AIDS activism in the 80s and what it felt like to come to America as an Iranian immigrant when AIDS and the crisis in New York was at its worst. But in interviewing, you know, people from that era, the activists of that era, they would often talk about how even though they were losing their friends and fighting for change, they were also dancing and flirting and laughing. And same when I would talk to queer people in Iran, it's like, yes, they're repressed. Yes, the law is not on their side, but they're still finding ways to party and congregate and do what they. And so it's about like that incredible resilience that humans have to find beauty even in the hardest moments.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that was great. Yeah, I love what you said about like finding beauty. That reminded me of an album title of Seether, a rock band that I like, Finding Beauty in Negative Spaces.
Ooh, I've never heard of that. That's so cool.
Yeah, yeah, they're a metal band from South Africa, and yeah, so that's exactly when you talked about like queer Iranians finding that beauty in those negative spaces.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, it really was. I mean, reading it, I think especially the moments and invocation of poetry and music, it was beautiful. And personally too, my father was a lot is I love my dad, but he's a lot more like the main character's father, Saeed. He's quieter. He doesn't like to openly express so much, doesn't say much when he doesn't have to. And I imagine that that this is a similar phenomenon for a lot of other people in our audience, for um people who carry over the trauma, of moving from the revolution or the Iran-Iraq War, or however people got here. Some people carry that trait. It's funny too, because my grandfather also would recite poetry and was a lot more outgoing. So the book, it
Right.
was so personal in so many ways. But I'd love if you could talk, God, and just the way you portray that dynamic, the things that are not said in moments that you think they should be said, or when Mood's inner monologue is so heartbreaking. It's so heartbreaking, and it's so
Yeah.
heartbreakingly true. Can you tell me about that process of painting all that, of painting that picture and exploring those emotions and then getting them on the page? It was
God, I mean, so
wow.
like you, I mean, you say that it was your experience, but it was my experience too. And maybe that says something about us as a people and about immigrants in general. I think so many of us have common experiences. And I guess for me, it was really, really important to portray a father-son dynamic that wasn't perfect and that maybe some people would read as deeply flawed, but that hopefully people would also see that there was a lot of love there and that there was a lot of support. And I think that came from, growing up, I came out first, the first person I came out to was my English teacher in high school. And I didn't come out to my parents until almost a decade later, because my parents were the hardest people to come out to. There was a whole narrative I had built up in my head over what that was going to mean to my family and the disappointment and my responsibility as a son and everything my parents had sacrificed for me. And when I did come out, and it was very hard, and I don't need to share all the details, but my parents are very close to me, and we have an amazing relationship, and they're the best grandparents to our children. So we've certainly worked through anything, but it takes time and it takes patience. And in my experience, a lot of Western people don't have time and patience to give. And so when I would talk to my Western gay friends about what I was going through as an Iranian coming out, and again, we're talking early before this moment, before the internet, before things really started to change for our community, so many of my Western friends would do what they often still do, which is say like, oh, well, you shouldn't talk to those people. You should just shut the door on them. Like, you shouldn't go home for holidays. You should, there was very much an attitude of like, I think American self-empowerment, which is all about like if someone doesn't accept you exactly as you are, you should shut the door on them. Whereas I was always raised in the language of family loyalty, of like the immigrant experience, which is family comes before anything else. And no matter what we went through and how many difficult conversations we had to have along the way, I was never going to shut the door on them and they never shut the door on me. That's one thing I really love about my family, and I think many in our community, is we may not agree on everything, but we don't stop seeing each other. We don't stop talking to each other. We don't stop supporting each other. So when I was writing this book, I really wanted to write a father character who was a little bit homophobic, not in a I'm going to kick you out of the house way, but in a quieter way, in a way that's like about compartmentalization and denial, and so much of, I think, what some of us in our community go through when we come out, which is it's not about like someone's going to do some horrible homophobic thing to you. It's just they're gonna like never talk about that part of your life, They're gonna, and that's kind of what the dynamic is. But there's also so much love there. There's still so much support. It's a complex, nuanced narrative. And and I think what I really was hoping to do in going back to the 1970s is to show what that father went through as a teenager himself. Like, it's so easy for a teenager in America who has all the privileges and, you know, safety in the world to judge his father for not accepting him, but without knowing what that father went through in a country that was in the middle of a revolution and then a war, to your point. I mean, has there been any Iranian who hasn't gone through some trauma in these decades? You know, it's all about empathy. You know, it's all about shining a light on each generation to say these people were shaped by their moment. And yes, they may be flawed, but it's because of where they were raised, their time, their place, their pain. And I just hope, I don't know, my biggest hope for the book, honestly, is just to encourage people to communicate more and judge less. There's so much, like, I don't know. One of the formative conversations I've had in the last few years was about this actress, Sydney Sweeney, who was on show Euphoria, but I guess she went to her mom's birthday party and some of the people were wearing MAGA hats, and she got really blasted by people on the internet. And I was in a group of young people who were talking, and they were like horrified that she would go to this party. And I'm like, but it was her mom's birthday party. And they were like, we wouldn't talk to our mom if she voted for Trump. And I'm like, well, it's your mom. And like, if you're an immigrant, you don't have a lot of people. Like, there's very few people in my life who really understood what I went through moving, you know, living in 4 countries by the time I was 10. Like, outside of my parents, my brother, and my cousins, there's no one. Like, no one around me has my experience. And so I was trying to explain to these people, like, it's not as easy as that for many of us. We don't walk out our door and have everybody look and act and think like us. Like, our families are our primary support system. And I just, I don't know, I just want to encourage more communication, empathy, and forgiveness, which I know sounds perhaps naive in this moment, but it's what I believe.
Well, it's a really such a needed goal. We need so many more pieces like this. And yeah, I mean, yeah, I think you really tap into that in this book, and I think if folks haven't yet read it, you really should. Yasmin, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you. Yes, Abdi, thank you so much. Yeah, like I completely agree what you're saying. Like I really hear what you're saying about immigrant families, and I can relate. I so much to you. I've moved around a ton, and like I spent a lot of my community experiences with non-Iranians, and like I, and a lot of my experience of my own Iranian identity, and my mother is Venezuelan, and like I've dealt with that mix, and like living in different places, including Venezuela, and I've dealt with that too. Like a lot of my cultural experience was tied to family, and so I can definitely get the family oriented part. And so leading with that, in terms of culture and the cultural differences between like Shane and Mood, how do you think this story relates to experiencing a hyphenated multicultural background for Iranian-Americans?
God, I mean, well, I think honestly, it's all about that. So much of the story in each person's perspective, you're experiencing a little bit of East and West of what each means. And I think what the story hopefully does is shows some of the, or at least what I think are some of the great attributes of each way of life, and also some of the trickier attributes of each way of life. I mean, I really feel like both East and West have a lot to learn from each other, as all human beings have a lot to learn from each other. And I hope that the book models some of that. I mean, I think that in the Iranian characters, you see more family loyalty. You see a little bit more of that like cultural heritage and history, things that I think often in the West are missing. Whereas in the West, you see a little bit more of like the importance of self-empowerment and actualization and ambition and things that sometimes can be really tricky in Iranian families. But, at its core, it begins, the whole book begins with a teenager, an Iranian-American teenager, going back to Iran for the first time and bringing a lot of his own judgments of what that's going to be. It begins with him kind of removing all his social media posts because he's openly gay and he's really scared of being openly gay. And he gets to Iran and he meets his like second cousin who immediately takes him to a party where almost everybody's queer. And that was very much inspired by the experience of a friend of mine. I have a friend who's American who was doing a Fulbright scholarship in Dubai, and he decided to go to Iran. And as an American, he had to go on get this cultural visa, and he was going on the tour group. And I said to him, no, like I'm having my cousin pick you up. You're not going to go on some like official tour. And he calls me at like 4 a.m. from Tehran, and he's just in shock because he's like, I don't understand what's happening. I'm at a party, everybody's gay, everybody's like having fun. I'm like, yeah, that's Tehran. Like, so, I wanted to have a character who begins with, even though he is Iranian, he hasn't been there and he has a lot of preconceived notion of what he's going to find, and he finds something different. And then I go in the past and I show a lot of the characters. The character in the 1970s is a young teenager who really believes in the ideals of the revolution. He's really bitter about what the US and the British did to Mossadegh, and he has a lot of hatred towards America, but then he has to go to America because he's caught, and that's the only way his parents can think of to make him safe. And so, there's in each perspective, you're seeing a lot of opinions about what it means to have one foot in one country and one foot in the other.
God. And I was thinking about that scene in particular just now when you talked about earlier about the when Mood goes out with his cousin or second cousin to the party in Tehran with so many queer people, and he makes some kind of reference to his boyfriend back home who would protest Chick-fil-A, that wouldn't eat a chicken sandwich from Chick-fil-A to protest, and made had a similar initial reaction to Mood going back to Iran, saying that, oh, isn't it illegal to be gay? Why would you put money in the hands of a regime that kills gay people? So I think you really do such a great job highlighting the where the Western ideal of self promotion can get tangled up
Yes. Well, and that, to be honest, that's kind of how the whole book started. The original, I had written a version. So the character in the 1930s begins in Los Angeles in the 30s. And I've always, when I moved to the US at age 10, I became obsessed with old Hollywood. I was a very odd child who, even in the 1980s and 90s, was watching like old Judy Garland and Joan Crawford movies and really loved that. And I really wanted to write a novel about old Hollywood. And so I started to write this book. It wasn't about an Iranian character. And my editor just felt that it wasn't personal enough for me and compared to the stuff I normally write. And so I put it away. And then one day I was staying, it was like the first time we had left the house for the pandemic. We went to a hotel because my husband was, yeah, well, whatever, long story. We went to a hotel and I got a phone call from a white gay man who I don't know very well. And he was livid with me because the hotel we were staying at is partially owned by the Sultan of Brunei. And he starts screaming at me like, how can you stay there? How dare you? Like, you who like are such a gay rights activist, like all this stuff. And before I could even say a word, he hung up on me. And I felt very jolted by that call. And I'm somebody who has a real guilty complex, and I really can't handle being screamed at. And I had a lot of trouble shaking it off. And as a writer, I always tell younger writers, like, if there's something inside you that feels like you can't make peace with it, that's probably something you have to write about. And the more I journaled and the more I kind of looked deep within myself, like, why did this phone call upset me so much? Like, I realized that it was really hard to be yelled at about my choices and how they affect global situations by somebody who's white and American, when if it weren't for the actions of America, my family probably wouldn't have had to leave Iran. There are a whole chain of events that led to some horrible things happening to my family. Like, all of that wouldn't have happened. I think many of us as immigrants, we have to balance this gratitude we feel toward the West for giving us a home that allows us this life of safety and abundance with the knowledge that we wouldn't have had to seek this home were it not for the actions of the country that took us in. And that's a really hard thing. Like, I'm not at all someone who like I love so much of what America represents, and my life is here, my children are here, you know, but I have to also have a really like a self-acceptance around why we're here in the first place and what America's done. And so I realize that that's why that phone call upset me so much. And it galvanized me to write a book that kind of explored that. And so the book begins with the boyfriend character judging the character of Mood, who's the modern day teenager when he is going to go back to Iran. The book kind of begins with his boyfriend judging him, saying, how dare you, can't go to this country, they kill gay people there, you can't do this. Like, there's no appreciation that that's where his grandfather lives and where his family's from. It's just like, nope, that's politically untenable. And that was where it all came from. That it started from that place. And then the rest of the book is really an exploration of what it means. And to me, it's, what does it mean when we cut off communication? What does it mean when we say, no, you can't go to that country? No, you can't talk to that person. No, you can't read that author. No, that person can't speak at our school. No, that valedictorian's not allowed to give a speech. You know, I mean, we're seeing it everywhere these days. Like, we're seeing people's speech, you know, the so-called freedom of speech is being cut constantly. We're just, especially in the last, you know, half year, we've seen it in alarming ways. And so that's really so much of what the book is about, is let's stop cutting off communication between each other. Nothing good comes from that. There's no historical precedent of that being a positive thing for humanity. Let's try and talk. Let's try and visit these places. I tell, like, you know, my books are banned all over the country. I write very gay books for teens. And a lot of authors don't want to go to places where their books are banned. I always tell my speaking agents, like, send me to schools in the places where my books are banned. Those are the kids that need me. Those are the kids that are going to get what the books are saying, because I come from a repressive culture myself. Like, I'm so uninterested in cutting off communication with anyone. Like,
Yeah, and honestly, that theme, that like conflict is something that we like, that our NIAC members and, you know, volunteers, friends, family have been struggling with deeply. Right, you know, like literally with travel to Iran. That, you know, that just the basic right to travel there, despite all the risks, you know, despite whatever you know, whatever risks people choose to take of their own accord, to see their family, to see loved ones, to connect. You know, it's not, in our view, it's not something that you restrict someone from doing ever. It's you know, and it's a fundamental right for people, and we
absolutely.
Your book, I think is a beautiful creative way to make that case. And to that end, I have another question before we move on to the Q&A section. We've had a number of questions pour into the Q&A. If folks have any other things that they're curious about, please drop it in there and we'll try to get to it. But yeah, I wanted to, I wanted to try and get more, a little more political.
Yeah. Oh,
if that's possible. I know we've kept Kamala Harris and Donald Trump out of this discussion. We still would like to keep them out of this discussion and focus more on just is, what role do you think, like, stories like this, stories that really explore duality and nuance and conflict, that they can play specifically, what role would you in building understanding for Iranian people, for Iranian culture, building bridges at a time right now where we're seeing so much honestly disgusting rhetoric calling and trying to justify aimless war and conflict and othering and boxing in an entire culture and people. So tell me what role and what things you hope.
It's too much for me to even consider what a book like could do, because I wrote it and I feel like it's too much for me to even go there. I can speak
I
more
mean, I'm
about
sorry if I mean broadly,
broadly.
Iranian.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Iranian.
broadly, I think the arts have a huge role to play. I mean, I think where the arts are so vital is they create empathy. And, look, politics, you guys are all more entrenched in the world of politics. I don't know how you do it. It would make me tear my hair out. Like, it's so hard for me to accept the kind of rhetoric that I hear in politics. It all feels so othering. It all feels so nasty. And I just feel like the arts at their core are about creating empathy. The arts are about allowing people into our common humanity. And I really do feel like I write very specific stories. My stories are deeply Iranian. They're very queer. They're very much about this niche identity that I have that very few other people who are out have. But I think the more, we always, like, writing teachers always say, in the specific is the universal. And I think that's really true. At their core, my books are also about wanting to be loved, wanting to remain close to your family. These are things that all human beings feel. And so I think what the arts can do is they shine a light on our specificities. And in doing so, they show us that we all have the same universal experiences. That's what we have to remember. I always feel like when I look at politicians, like, where are the politicians that are going to point out that, like, we're actually all in the same boat right now? Like, the biggest issues, climate change, the fact that corporations are taking over the world and robbing us of our, humanity as individuals. Like, these are things that we as a global people are all facing together. At some point, COVID, viruses, health, like, food scarcity, water scarcity. I mean, and there's so many ways. Like, where are the politicians who are actually uniting all of humanity, making us see that all these borders are kind of silly, and we are at some point going to have to come together as humans, or we're doomed. Like, I'm waiting for that from politicians. I don't hear a lot of that. So I turn to the arts mostly, because the arts are where I feel that. It's where I feel connected to the human experience, which is what I need to get through the day, honestly. So yeah, but yes, and look, in my childhood, I could go on and on. There weren't a lot of Iranian stories when I was young. So I wish I had been exposed outside of the poetry. The poetry really was the Iranian representation. The Iranian representation to me were like Rumi poems, Omar Khayyam poems. But I think, like, certainly as a queer person, as a gay person who came of age at a time where there was no internet, and at a time where there were no queer books in libraries and schools, like, I can't, in my novel, like a love story, I talk a lot about Madonna, who, when I was young, was the first person to show gay representation that wasn't about gay men dying, that wasn't about stigma and shame. It was about, the first gay pride parade I saw was in her documentary. In the Vogue video, she showed these queer men of color who looked a little like me and weren't, the dominant thing. And that changed my life. It really did. So I know firsthand the power of representation. I've gotten letters from people who've never seen themselves represented before, who are queer Iranians, for example. I know what that means. It shows you that you exist. It's very hard. When I grew up, I always felt like, am I the only one? Like, I really didn't think there were gay Iranians. I thought being gay was something only white people were. I really did. Because there were none. There were none. Until I saw one of Madonna's backup dancers, who wasn't Iranian, but he was I think from another, I think he was Egyptian, or I can't remember, but his name was Salim Slam, they called him. And that was life-changing for me when I realized he was gay. I was like, oh my God, there's a gay brown person and he's friends with Madonna and he's out, and, like, So yeah, I do think the arts have a role to play.
Wow. Yeah, no, I love yeah, I love all of this. Yeah, so much again resonates with me. Like, yeah, no, I definitely feel you on the lack of representation. Like it was just so, so hard for me growing up too. And
Yeah.
that is so awesome that, you know, she had like an Egyptian dancer that was
I
open about
think,
his
God, now I want to
sexuality
look him up. I don't
too.
want to get it wrong. I don't want to get it wrong.
Yeah, yeah, no. All
Hold
right.
on. I'm looking him up because now I feel bad.
Yeah,
Um,
sure. So I definitely want to, we have so many questions in the chat, which is so awesome. Yeah, definitely Google that man's name so we can pronounce it correctly. Um, so we can get the name right. But yeah, so we have so many lovely questions in the chat, and we'll try to get to as many as possible for the Q&A. So, all right. I like this. This is a good one. So, number one, was your family supportive of you being gay? Most families are not. What's your advice to young Iranians who want to open up to their family but are scared?
he was Moroccan and Belgian. I feel like I don't want to get this wrong. I looked it up. Okay.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
So the question about my family, how my family was, most families are not. What is your advice to young Iranians who want to open up but are scared? So like I said, the thing about my family, and I think this is, I've spoken to so many Iranians who, you know, seek my advice about coming out, I suppose, or just friends. Um, it the lack of support didn't manifest in ways that were aggressive. They manifested through denial and compartmentalization. So, you know, I often talk, like people ask me about my coming out, and I'm like, well, you have to understand in cases like mine, it's not one coming out. It's a coming out and a reminder of the coming out and a reminder. It's like, nope, still gay, like not a phase, not over. Like I always felt like if I broke up with a boyfriend, they would think like, oh, that's over, you know? And so a lot of it is about, you know, young people love to say it's not their job to educate anyone about their identity. And I get it. Like I get how exhausting it is because I've had to do it. But in my case, I literally made it my job, both as a writer, but just as a human. Like, so a lot of it for me with my family was having the patience to constantly go back to the table and keep educating them about my identity, that it wasn't like a choice, that it wasn't something that I could decide to stop, that, you know, that I would have to, that it wasn't, you know, they didn't know a lot about the queer community. And people often would say, like, how did your parents not know you were gay? Because I was obsessed with Madonna and Judy Garland and stuff. But it's like, well, they didn't know those were gay icons. It wasn't, my parents thought I had a crush on Madonna. You know, they didn't know I wanted to be her. Like so I think so much of it for me
Mhm.
was really recognizing that everything my parents gave me, which is so much. I have great, great parents. I love them. Like I now had to I had to educate them about my world, my identity, who I was, bring them into my life, be patient as I did that because I knew that it wasn't going to be some overnight thing. But like I said, we have like an amazing relationship. They're such good grandparents. I also think, to be honest, and I say this to so many of my American parent friends, like it's been we have the best kids. Like my kids are almost 13, they're twins. They're just such kind, curious, beautiful people. And I think a lot of the reason for that is that they were raised in a really diverse family. Like my parents are Iranian with very different values. My husband's from Ohio, but his parents divorced really young and his mom converted to Islam and married a Lebanese Muslim, and they're very involved in their religion, whereas my parents are not religious. Like they're exposed to people from so many different types of thinking, and we love them all, despite the fact that we may all have slightly different values or different political leanings or different this. And I think that that's so important for young people to learn that they can love people even if they don't agree with every single thing that person might think or believe. So to me, it's a real gift. It's a gift to get to love my parents, even though we are going to diverge on some opinions. And it's a gift to have my kids exposed to Iranian culture through them. And I don't know. In the end, it really is to me, in the end, it was a really positive thing. Like, of course, it would be wonderful if I'd just been accepted wholesale right away. But I think this made me a more thoughtful person and made me have to think a lot about what does empathy really mean? I mean, does empathy even mean anything if you only have it for people who agree with you? Not really.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, I love
Oh,
that.
and
I
advice,
totally
advice
agree.
for, yeah. And I
And
think,
I,
sorry,
yeah.
the second half of the question was about advice for young people. I mean, I think in terms of advice for young people, the first thing would be you have to stay safe. So, you know, if in my case, I knew I had a family that was never going to hurt me in any way. I had a loving, beautiful family. Like staying safe is crucial. Nobody has to come out. I think
Mhm.
there's a real narrative around coming out in the West that is something you have to do, and that's not necessarily the case. I knew I was going to do it because I wanted to be a writer, I wanted to express myself, I wanted to have children. There were so many things I wanted to do that were going to require me to be very public about my identity. But, you know, be safe. I think finding community first, you know, in my case, I said like it took me almost a decade from my first coming out to my English teacher to coming out to my parents. Like you need that community, that support system in place first, so that you have people to fall back on. You can't do it alone. So I think that would be some advice I would give.
Oh yeah, no, I love that. I completely like,
That's
Uh-oh.
you there. I think we lost you.
I love what you, oh,
Oh, you're
hi.
back. You're back.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Yeah, no, I was just saying, I love what you were saying about empathy and having empathy for people who are different from you. And yeah, no, like, it's just so hard. And yeah, is it truly empathy if you can't have it for people that are different from you? Like, what's the point? And all right, other questions. So has the Iranian community towards you and LGBT people, do you think it has evolved from earlier years, like since when you were coming out?
Oh, night and day. So different. I can't even tell you how different. I mean, before I wrote my first novel, I had made a short film called Revolution about a young Iranian teen, and I could not get Iranian male actors to even audition for it. And anyone who knows Hollywood knows how hard it is for any Iranian to get a role. So you would think they would be lining up for any role. But, you know, we had one actor audition for the lead, one. There was going to be two, and the second one at the last minute called and said his parents wouldn't let him. For the father character, who wasn't gay, father character was straight, but it was a gay film. We could not get anyone, and the amazing woman who played the mom eventually called one of her friends and begged him to do it, and he did. But I mean, that's how bad it was. Like no Iranian, and these are actors, these are artists, these are like artists are supposed to be accepting and progressive. I mean, we could not get anything. We couldn't get the film into any Iranian festivals. There was an Iranian festival here in LA. They wouldn't let the film in, and I attended out of curiosity to see what they let in. I'm like, okay, this is absurd, that they wouldn't screen this. And you know, similarly with my first book, The Walking Closet, we couldn't get many Iranians to pay attention to it. There was so much homophobia. We had this amazing woman here in LA hosted a book club for an older generation of Iranians, and it was an amazing thing she did because a lot of people asked questions that I think many would characterize as very ignorant, but I would characterize them as really brave and curious because these were people who had never talked about gay rights or gay life before. It was really powerful. But since then, you know, here in Los Angeles, we now have an LGBTQ Iranian group that organizes events. So many of us have come out. I mean, my God, when the protests started after, you know, the death of Gina Massa Amini, I would go to so many protests here. We would bring our kids, and it was so powerful because all the Iranians were out together. There was the queer group marching next to the old monarchists, next to like just the North, you know, it was so, I'm like, oh, wow, like this is the first time I've ever seen anything like this. Like we're actually all united. So I think it's been really powerful. And we're seeing a real boom in queer Iranian storytelling and representation and just people coming out more and more. There's more of us who are vocal. So yeah, I think it's changed a lot. I think it's changed a lot. To be honest, I think most Iranians I know are not that homophobic. I think at heart, what they care about is what other people think. Iranians are obsessed with what other people in the community think. And so once a few people in the community started to signal, we don't care if people are gay, it's fine. then little by little, other people were like, oh, well, our biggest fear was that somebody would judge us. You know, it wasn't that we had some moral problem with queerness. So yeah, I think it's really changed for the better, and I'm really proud of our community, to be honest. I think we are having conversations that are very uncomfortable for us, and that's so important. And I think we're seeing beautiful results from it.
And if I may, like,
Yes, thank you so much.
sorry, I was just gonna say, I think so many of our of queer Iranian Americans who I've met through NIAC, you know, people are also like deeply aware of just the freedom and the platform we have here, and you know, it's been such a it's a we're a hyper aware community, like
Yes.
like you said.
Yes.
Go ahead, back to you, Yasmin. Sorry.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, I agree with you, Abdi, that we've come such a way. Like it's so incredible. Like I came out as bisexual when I was 19.
Wow.
So, and there were hardly any stories that I could think of. Yeah, there were hardly any stories I could think of that were Iranian and that were about like gay and bisexual people, and like I didn't see it. I even would settle. I just wanted to see like Iranian representation, even if they were straight.
Totally.
And
Oh, of course.
when I heard about you and when I heard about Adib, what?
Yes. Adib is amazing. I mean, there's so many now.
Yeah, yeah, it's incredible. Like there's you and Adib and Sarah Farizan,
Our
like,
son.
and
Yeah.
yeah, like, and like when I came out, like I just felt like I did not know where to turn, and like I just felt really lost, and I was just looking for representation of any kind, and like that fit any of my identities, but like
Yeah.
especially like it was just such a trip for me to hear about all of these openly gay and bisexual Iranian-American writers. It was so amazing. And I definitely think that we've progressed so much. And I've heard of Raha International, who
Yeah,
I
that's
hope
the
to meet with
organization
one
here. Yeah.
day. And
Raho is amazing.
yeah,
And
yeah.
and
Yes.
you know what makes me so happy is all the queer Iranians I know love our culture so much. We love the language, we love the music, we love the food. Like there were many years, we kind of stopped during COVID, but there were many years where some friends and I would host a Nowruz party together, all like LA-based Iranian artists. And it would be like the same food our parents served, the same music our parents played, all the same things, but everybody was like queer and artistic and non-judgmental. And a lot of us still have kids, you know, yes, I'm gay, but I have two kids. And, you know, I have a friend who's bi who has kids who's Iranian. Like, and it was just so beautiful because it's like, it's such a testament to our culture and to our parents and to how we were raised that we love the culture so much that we commit to it. I mean, that's why I write every book about us. It's like, I love us. I love us. I love our culture.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. I completely agree. Like we have such pride for our culture, even with our struggles with coming out, with our sexualities. So we have time for one more question before closing remarks.
Okay.
Um, so um, is there any plans for a Farsi translation slash audiobook?
That's a tough question. I wish there was one time with one of my books. It wasn't this book, it was another book where somebody had inquired about publishing in Iran. And because of laws and stuff, my agents basically said, we can't do business with Iran. But you can basically tell them that you won't sue them if they decide to do it. And I know the book has been disseminated in Iran, you know, because people have reached out to me. I don't know that there can be, if somebody in Los Angeles or someone wanted to do a Farsi translation, I would be thrilled. I would really love that. But as of now, nobody's approached me. But I will say for me, one of the most moving things was somebody sent me a photo and they allowed me to post it of the book in Iran. It was like they were holding the book up right outside Azadi Tower in Tehran. And it really moved me because the book is very queer and very, has a lot to say about the regime in Iran, and it it's a real act of defiance to bring that book into the country and to photograph it in the country and to reach out to the author and send it. And, so I know the book is at least reaching some Iranians. I would love it if it was translated. If anyone out there wants to translate it, reach out.
Thank you so much. Yeah, no, I would love it. I certainly would love Farsi translation, and it would be a great way for me to practice too. So yeah, now that we are coming to a close, are there any closing remarks, Abdi, you would like for to make for our event?
Oh gosh. I mean, first of all, apologies if we didn't get to your question. You're welcome to reach out to me if there's something you want answered that we didn't get to. In terms of what you were saying about whether our community has changed, I think in closing, I just like to say this is a prime example of how our community has changed. I mean, the fact that this conversation is happening, that NIAC is hosting conversations like this, that our community is showing up and taking an interest, that is the change. The change just comes in just being open to discussing our different experiences. And so I just really appreciate that you guys are doing this. Like I said, it's hard for me to exist and spend too much of my life in a political headspace because I feel like as somebody who is both a writer and a parent, I feel like I have to remain hopeful and optimistic, and it's really hard. But I obviously stay informed, and I'm alarmed and horrified by so much of what's happening, and I just appreciate anyone who's willing to get in and do the work to make the world better for others.
Well, Abdi, we really appreciate you for doing this. Even if you stay out of the fray politically, simply by existing, creating, connecting with other Iranian-Americans, you are being an active political player, unfortunately, in today's climate. And we are so happy and proud also just to have a network of Iranian-Americans around the country and to be able to host things like this. And I do want to plug that you have an event coming up in LA.
Yes, it's not. So this is not an event, though there will be an event. This is actually, I'm doing a pre-order giveaway for my next book, which is called Desert Echoes, which is very Iranian and very queer, with Chevalier's books, which here in LA is the oldest indie bookstore. So all books pre-ordered there will be signed and personalized. And I should add, I'm going to say one last thing in closing on behalf, not just of myself, but on behalf of all my Iranian artist friends, because we all say this all the time. It's very hard to get the Iranian community engaged in the art we make. I know a lot of Iranian writers, directors, actors, artists of all kinds, and they all say the same thing, and I say the same thing, which is we see more support from Western communities than from our own often, which is part of why I appreciate that you're doing this so much. But I would just say if you're Iranian, you're here, you already are supportive, but I think we need to educate our community about how important it is to support each other out there, because it's very hard. It's very hard in the climate we live in to be telling our stories. And there's a lot of brave people putting their vulnerability out there.
And Abdi, you couldn't have let it in even better to my next plug, which is NIAC's upcoming next book talk with Neda Semnani. So if you're on this one, please RSVP for that. And Abdi will be sending out a follow-up email to everyone who RSVP'd for this with your info going forward.
Amazing.
Thank you so much for this. We really appreciate it. Such a welcome break from the political news of the day. We're going to be trying to do a lot more of these, and we really appreciate you and your time for this, Abdi.
Thank you.
I appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone who was here. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Have a nice day, everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.